But you before getting into prison and just like like you say, getting involved in the drug game and stuff and the cartel stuff. I mean, how prevalent is that in like Texas? I mean, because people watch all these like Narcos and different shows, and they see like Ozarks, and I mean, how big is the game really, man, that people just have no clue as far as like, even your involvement in the cocaine game?
It's definitely, the reality of it is not how they portray it on movies. It's everything you see on movies is romanticized. And it's sad because a lot of people even talking about the stories now, I feel like they feel the need to romanticize their stories and not tell it in a real fashion. Even the quote cartels, it's a loose organization of people, and at times there'll be more organization, there'll be a clear leader. But if you really understand what's going on in Mexico and what's resulted in all these cartel wars, it's because they actually don't have a lot of organization. So San Antonio, Texas, though, is a city unlike any other city, or at least it was 20-something years ago. And the reason why is that 85% of the trucks that enter the United States enter through Nuevo Laredo, which then goes to San Antonio, Texas. So if you look at the population centers, the vast majority of the population in the United States is all on the East Coast. So if you're smuggling drugs into the United States, do you want to smuggle it over here in California and then you have to drive all the way across the United States? Or do you want to smuggle it over here through Nuevo Laredo, and then you're closer to the eastern seaboard? And then the other thing too is because of the NAFTA agreement, 85% of the trucks entering in the United States were going through Nuevo Laredo. It is a small city. It is not big. So 85% of the trucks coming into the United States are going through that one city and then going through San Antonio, Texas. And this was at the time where when I was around it was early 2000s. Mind you, Pablo had been killed in 1993. And after Pablo had been killed, the power went from Colombia, it then went to Mexico. Before they killed Pablo, the Mexican cartels, they did weed, but I mean, they weren't even really cartels. It was people down there growing weed, but there just wasn't this massive amount of violence. But once the power went away from Colombia, it then started to go into Mexico. And at that particular time, because of all the trucks going in through Nuevo Laredo, that was the Gulf Cartel's territory. And what really started all the wars that led to 55,000 people dying in Juarez over the course of 3 years was because the DEA, or the Mexican Federales, whoever you want to say, because I mean, you'll learn tomorrow when you talk to Roger how the DEA will use the Mexican Federales to basically do their black ops works. Wait for tomorrow, man. That's absolutely insane. So whether it was the DEA, whether it was the Federales, it was some type of police organization in Mexico. They killed the leader of the Gulf Cartel. So that created a power struggle. At that time, they were the strongest cartel, and the Zetas were on the border. They were their enforcers, and the Zetas were under the Gulf Cartel. So now you have this power struggle, and there's not, this cohesive leader, and they're fighting amongst themselves. So this is what gives rise to the Sinaloa cartel and the Tijuana cartel. They come together and say, we're going to go take over Nuevo Laredo because that's where all the trucks are coming in.
Wow.
So the reason why it happened in Juarez is because that was the battle line between the Gulf cartel and the other cartels coming together. So after that, though, the Zetas said, you know what? We don't give a fuck who wins this cartel war. These trafficking routes, this is ours. We don't give a shit. You guys are paying us coming through the fucking border. So now the Zetas are battling the Gulf Cartel, the Sinaloa. They're battling everyone.
Damn.
So they have to become the most fucking savage group there is. And you look at all like the brutal savagery that happened in those fucking cartel wars, and it was the fucking Zetas. And it's because they were battling everyone.
Now, how much involved would you say the American government is in controlling that pipeline of drugs? Because I mean, there's a lot of. I mean, dude, it's got to be.
I mean, come on now. Look at Rick Ross. Look at the Iran-Contra affair. Look at all of these things that took fucking place. To me, it blows my mind that people could look at the United States government and ultimately what they're doing, and still have an ounce of credibility.
That's what I mean.
When there's all these facts. So me personally, I don't really think anything happens in Mexico without their knowledge or without their knowing. And if they're letting something continue, then there's some benefit. Personally, and you can call me a conspiracy theorist, whatever, there's some benefit that we don't know about, and that's ultimately why they're letting it happen. The second Sicario movie, I think, has a lot of truth in it. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah, I've seen it.
But they were trying to take out the Mexican cartel so that the power would go back to Colombia, because when it was in Colombia, it was manageable and they had control over it. So it's, to me personally, I think that everything that's going on there is pretty much under their influence.
Well, what about now though? Because now, and I'm gonna circle back to your initial case, but now, like from all the documentaries and podcasts I've listened to, a lot of like the elite Mexican military have been trained by our Navy SEALs and our Delta Force. But now they're saying, I forgot the name of the cartel, but their top guys are Delta Force and ex-Navy SEALs that have been contracted, kind of like going to Blackwater, and now they're working for the cartels. And dude, these guys got the same, like literally, you fly in a Black Hawk, they got counter weapons. You know, they can shoot a helicopter out the sky. I mean, these guys they're not like little dude guys running around with cowboy hats on and boots. These guys are highly skilled, highly trained by American special forces.
So do you remember when the Russians fought in Afghanistan?
Yeah.
Do you remember what ended that war?
Is when the CIA, didn't they train Osama bin Laden and as the move had
they gave them the rocket launcher.
That's right. That's right.
So now go to Mexico, right, and look at these cartels, and look at the training they have. That's coming from some government somewhere. So what is one of our biggest enemies right now? What country?
China.
The fentanyl that's coming into the United States, where's it coming from?
China.
So who do you think's down there really giving them those weapons and giving them those trainings? I think now, and once again, you can call me conspiracy theorist, I think now that all the cartel activity that happens in Mexico is an extension of China trying to take us out at our ankles, is what I personally think.
No, I totally agree with you, because it's no different than if people study like Cecil Rhodes and the Opium Wars, and how, you know, rather than sacrificing your own people, what you do is you flood a country with drugs, let them consume themselves. And that's why China got so hard on heroin over there, where it's a death penalty, because they seen what it did to their people, and people basically just gave up. They were all getting high. So if they use that same war tactic in America, we can break you guys down. We don't need to invade you guys. You guys will destroy your own cities, your own communities, and we'll just come in and pick the pieces up economically, because now you're so dependent on cleaning up your country that we can offer you deals and you guys will bow down to us. And we don't want to destroy the stuff. We want to take all your resources. So people thinking, oh my God, they're going to invade. No, they don't need to. Just flood the country with fentanyl. And it's the same shit.
Well, they don't want to destroy us. They want to control us.
Yeah, they want it intact. You want to be able to come in and buy the property up. They don't want blowing up craters of nuclear. They want to be able to come here and basically take the fertile resources and cultivate with their own people, and you know. So I look at it the same way. When you study the art of war and just like, you know, how you really take over your enemy. You know.
Well, and I think it also. It makes another valuable point that kind of goes back to the reference to the Sicario movie. Every time the DEA or the United States government does something where they think they're going to have a major breakthrough in the war on drugs, things get worse. I don't know if you've seen the documentary of the old head of the DEA, but Pablo used to make all of his cocaine in one manufacturing facility in Colombia. And they traced the precursors back to it. They were able to locate it, and they blew it up. So they were all patting each other, you know, on the back, and they made a statement. They released a statement to all of the police departments across the United States, and they said, "Hey, we can't tell you exactly what happened, but we just had a major breakthrough. Cocaine's about to dry up. You know, it's going to slowly get less pure. It's going to get more expensive, and it's not going to be as available." So the head of the DEA at the time, he said 3 months later, when he saw the exact opposite happen, he said that's when he said, "Okay, enough is enough. This is never going to work." And 3 months after that happened, cocaine got cheaper, cocaine got purer, and cocaine got more readily available. Because Pablo said, You guys got me. I had all my eggs in one basket. So rather than have one main production facility, I'm going to have three. And rather than just pump this much cocaine, I'm going to pump 3 times as much cocaine into the United States. So the lesson is there. If there's a will, there's a way. There's always going to be drugs. The same thing happened with methamphetamine production in the United States. Methamphetamine was getting out of control. And so the DEA said, we have to take this out. We're going to eliminate all U.S.-based methamphetamine production, because it was something like 90% of the meth that was being used was coming from U.S.-based production. And guess what? They did it. And what happened? Meth got cheaper, more readily available, and purer, because the Mexican cartels recognized the opportunity and they created these giant pharmaceutical grade production facilities down there. So it's the same thing with the cartels in all of these wars. It weakened them to where they then became susceptible to outside influence. Because before, like when 9/11 happened, they thought that, you know, terrorists would try to enter in through the southern border. But the intelligence, what was coming is that even though the Mexicans, the cartels down there, were still trying to get drugs into the United States, they still loved the United States. And if any terrorists tried to come through Mexico, they would kill them. So it was, you know, there was still like some kind of loyalty to them. But now here it is 20 years later. And if you ask me whether it's they're not having loyalty to America anymore, or whether it's from the cartels being vulnerable and open to outside influence because of the, you know, years of just going through these brutal cartel wars, here it is once again where we thought we were fixing a problem, and lo and behold, we've just made it worse, where I personally think that we opened those cartels up to outside influence from China. So now we have China in our backyard flooding fentanyl into the United States, and ultimately it was our own doing because we weakened them to make them susceptible.
What about, you know, when you look at in a whole like you know, say it like in Mexico, like okay, under Fox, you know, you had certain cartels that were in good standing, so literally they would have their own towns, and these guys have strongholds in certain areas. Like people think, oh, the Tijuana border. In order to get these guys, you got to go thousands of miles in. These guys aren't just hanging out. Like the real guys, from what I've heard and studied, they're in strongholds, bro, that'll protect you. You can't even.
Of course.
It's not like you can get there with one helicopter flight. You'd have to fly like a fighter jet in there to get to them, because they're so far from the border, and they're insulated. And so when you got that going on, right, when you talk about like the amount of money, not just in America, but now in Europe, because I've seen like Europe's blew up, like the Turkish mob, all these different people that are moving drugs into Europe. I mean, the cartel is, they're making a shit ton of money over in Europe. Not even, I mean, a lot of money, because there's no production, and it's way over there, so the price of a kilo, whatever, is quadruple. So now when you take all that in consideration and all the money, and literally guys running around with armored vehicles, 50 cals, I mean, in Mexico, the government literally in bed with these people, how did they ever plan to eradicate that? They would literally have to sit at a table rather than trying to kill these, make a truce and try to get them to push China back out in order to make it fair. Because if you go in there like guns blazing, dude, you're not gonna be able to do anything. Because these guys, they're so evolved now with technology, counter surveillance, drones, China's technology. They got submarines. I mean, you would have to make it favorable for them to be like, look, let's try to do something fair, so that way we can continue to make money, but it's not going to offend you guys, and we'll kick these guys back out.
As long as there's a demand, there will always be
That's
a
what I'm saying.
supply.
You can't. How are you going to stop it?
You can't. You absolutely can't. And that comes up to a distinction between power and force. So you can never force someone to stop using drugs. You just can't do it. Force is the use of punishment, the use of rational choice theory to try to say, hey, because of this punishment, the consequences will outweigh the benefit. And when you look at the criminological research, when it comes to not just drug use, but all crime, it just doesn't add up. And the laws have very, very low deterrent value to them. And so it just doesn't make sense that we have this criminological research out there that proves beyond the shadow of a doubt that these laws really aren't deterring anything. And yet America is addicted to drugs, but they're also addicted to the use of force and the war on drugs. And if you look at both sides, it's here's a drug user who's continuing to use drugs. They know the negative consequences, but yet because of their addiction, they cannot say no, even when they know it's futile. And you look at our approach to the war on drugs, and we are just as addicted to it. There's too much evidence right now that proves the war on drugs, the emphasis on using force to end drugs will never work, and yet we are addicted to it. We continue even though it's never produced any fruitful results. Power is something that if you look at when people really stop using drugs and they change their lives, not just with drug use, but anything, the addiction no longer has the value anymore. They realize that the addiction was just a Band-Aid to try to cover up some wounds or whatever it is. And they've been changed where they have a new perspective, and now they have meaning, the pain's gone away, the trauma's gone away, and they willingly pursue something else. There's no emphasis on that at all when it comes to how we're trying to stop drugs. We can sit there and say, oh, well, there's rehabilitation programs, and it doesn't really work. Well, when you actually go into prisons and you see what those rehabilitation programs are, it's a bunch of bureaucrats who don't give a shit about their job and don't give a shit about the people that they're actually in charge of. So I think that's the biggest discrepancy that people need to really understand is the difference between power and force, in that if all we do is focus on force, we're going to make the problem worse. We're going to lead to situations where 55,000 people die in 3 years. We're going to lead to the situations where now you have this criminal organization that's susceptible to outside influence from a foreign government. You have to be able to take away the profit in order to really make those organizations go away. What happened for the past 4 years with the border being open, not a lot of people know this because not a lot of people live in Texas or live on the border, but the cartels loved that border being open, open. They were making so much money because think about it. If I'm trying to get drugs into the United States, right, I have to try to avoid detection. You're not just opening up the floodgates and saying, yeah, bring in as many drugs as you want. So there's losses. You have to try to avoid detection. Well, if the border's open, why do I want to try to get keys into the United States when there's all these people that are showing up to the border that want to get in the United States, and I'm saying this is my territory. If you want to go past this line, you pay me $10,000. And so the border being open just created this whole other source of revenue for the cartels. Yeah. And they loved it.
Human trafficking.
Yeah, human trafficking, because imagine if you were on the border and you didn't even have to go get the keys. The keys were coming to you, and then the United States was saying, yeah, give us all the keys you want, and the keys are going to bring $10,000 with them to put it in your pocket. You'd be sitting there like, this is the greatest situation. This is the greatest situation in the world. And it was, and it absolutely, I mean, the stories of what happened down on the border from the human trafficking, I mean, they are just, it's heartbreaking. It created a humanitarian crisis. And it's just, you know what I mean, for what? And all it did was give more power or more force and more money to the cartels. And once again, here it is, these asinine criminal justice policies to where it's this knee-jerk reaction, and there's no real thought about what the real consequences are and how the lives of people are being, affected.